Yeah. So yeah, as you mentioned, I'm Mike, and I work on the Flutterfire open source project. But I'm also CTO at a company called Invitaze, which my main kind of purpose there is I kind of oversee the technical direction of our open source projects, and one of those, of course, is Flutterfire, and we have some other ones like you mentioned, React Native Firebase, and
Yeah, so I wanted to. You had mentioned you have like a quick demo. Did you want to share that and show us what you can sort of showcase with these tools, and give a better explanation?
yeah, sure, I can. This is just a brief demo, just to kind of show the code and just kind of the usage and the kind of apps you can build. So in this kind of scenario, in this demo, I'm kind of using the Cloud Firestore library, which is a NoSQL database, which kind of scales really well, infinitely scalable. Has real-time support, those kinds of things, and integrating it in your Flutter app is kind of pretty straightforward, really. I think, you just install the package by adding it to your pub-spec, Cloud Firestore. Obviously, you need core as well. And then, you initialize your app. And then, you can build out an application from there. So in this example here is the example that's officially on the plugin itself. So the source code is all available on GitHub. But in this example, it's just a basic movie app. And it kind of showcases some of the features of Firebase. You can do all sorts of querying. So in this example, we have filtering, say, by a genre, so sci-fi in this case. You can also sort by likes descending, all sorts of things based on your own data. So basically the Firestore SDK, 1 second. So it's got a ton of querying APIs, which we've kind of documented all here.
Yeah.
It's a standard database. You can do quite flexible querying. And then on top of that, you have the real-time aspect. So as an example of that is, if I go on the Firebase backend now and change the likes of, say, this one, and we'll come back to it and you'll see it's updated in real time. So I set that to 12 because it's 12 angry men. Come back and now you see it's at the top. So yes, all those kind of things are pretty cool in my opinion on how kind of Firestore works, and along with all the other Firebase services there. But it's a brief demo. I think I didn't really have much else to show you there. The app's already built.
Yeah.
And, for being honest.
Yeah. And is this you said this is actually linked to the official library, this example?
Yeah, it is. So on GitHub, once it loads, so in the packages, and then Cloud Firestore again, and then the official example. That's the exact same code, just running in my browser. That's all.
Cool. That's good to know, because I think the best place to get your hands on this, being in the repo, is actually a good place to have it. I'm curious though. You had mentioned other libraries, so how is this different from, any other library off the shelf? Like, do you find other plugins to be able to interact with Firebase with?
There's a couple of other open source ones that kind of try to implement the full Firebase API in pure Dart.
Yeah.
But I think the level of work required there versus kind of wrapping an existing official SDK is a lot more complex, and a lot more can go wrong.
Yeah.
So we kind of just stick to the tried and tested SDKs that already exist and just provide an interface to them.
Okay, gotcha. So I guess to clarify, this is all written in Dart.
There's Dart, Java, and Objective-C. It's a mixture of languages.
Okay, and specifically, I guess the Java comes in for the Android uses.
Exactly. Yeah, and Objective-C for iOS. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I'm curious your experience. What's your experience with Dart? Have you had a lot of time to play around with it?
Yeah, I'm fairly new to Dart, probably like 2 years. But I've come from other languages, a lot of them really. But leaning towards Dart as my favorite language, I guess. It's just,
Really?
type safety, null safety. You kind of get all that out the box. And yeah, I've enjoyed working on it. And kind of every time there's a project in that space, I'm kind of one of the first to jump on it, really.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because I've known about Dart for quite a few years, but I've never actually jumped it or built anything with it. And perhaps maybe actually outside of the Flutter space, is Dart being leveraged in places like Polymer or anything else in the Google world?
Not fully sure on that. I know there's like
Yeah,
some kind of Angular things for that, and there's also all the whole Dart server side things that you can do, like cloud functions for Firebase. You can write in Dart.
yeah,
There's all sorts of things you can do. It's kind of like the Node.js ecosystem where you can do back end stuff as well, server side things.
yeah, yeah. Because that's my reservations. Like I'm actually really interested in Flutter, but my reservation has always been if I go dig into the ecosystem of Dart, like is that going to transfer over to other things that I can also build, or is this going to be the one thing I do in mobile? Which I found with things like Objective C, which I did a bit of iOS quite a few years ago. None of that, other than the fact that then we have TypeScript, like with the types in JavaScript. None of that other stuff clearly translated or transferred.
I think I don't know. I think if you transfer into some kind of other type safety kind of equivalent language, then I think there'll be a lot of things that will make sense. So if you're using TypeScript, for example, and you come to Dart, a lot of things will make sense in terms of how the types work and things like that. So I don't say it would be a waste of learning it. It's just how portable to another language it would be. I'm not 100% sure on.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough too as well. But I'm just super excited about the idea of Flutter and how it's sort of taken off. I'm curious. So I'm gonna switch to my screen real quick because I was thinking about as you were talking. I've used Firebase, and this is so I mentioned I had an iOS app. This is from 2016, so it's a it's pretty old. But I was like, I wonder how I was because I remember I was using Firebase on this, and like this heads up, I did archive this. Please don't go contribute and do this. But
send all the PRs.
Yeah, so this was using the Firebase like JavaScript package. I'm curious if like this Firebase this still is this still around the SDK for Firebase when it comes to like Node.js? And is this when you say you're
it is, yeah.
So is this what you're wrapping the Flutterfire with?
Yeah, so Flutter supports quite a lot of platforms. So on web, for example, we'd wrap the JS SDK.
Okay.
Whereas on Android, we'd wrap the Android SDK, and iOS the iOS SDK.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, because like what I liked about this and like this going through, I'm just gonna go back to remember lane and remember how I actually, this was a React Native app. That's why this is a JavaScript package.json. But the way I sort of interacted with honestly, this is going to be really challenging to remember how React Native worked back then. This is very early React Native. Which speaks
speaking
that's
pre-React Native Firebase as well.
Yeah, wait, yeah, because you're maintaining another project, which is the React Native version of this.
Yeah, that's the React Native version.
Okay, excellent. So how does that translate to your work with Flutterfire?
There's a ton of similarities, I'd say, on like the way we wrap things, and getting the full in depth of the original SDKs. Like a lot of the Android and iOS code to serialize data across, so in React Native the bridge or Flutter the method channels. It's very similar logic and very similar in the way you handle things. So a lot of it does transfer over, which is kind of why I guess we're working on the Flutterfire ones as well, because it's existing knowledge.
Yeah. We did get some comments and questions in the chat too as well, which I do want to address because I completely missed them. Vortex is actually asking about Dart SaaS rewrite from Dart Professional's perspective. So I'm not sure if you have any context around the Dart SaaS rewrite.
I'm not 100% sure, no. I know that Dart, there's a SaaS implementation in Dart,
Okay.
and I heard something about it being rewritten, but I'm not sure, to be honest. Sorry.
Okay. And then I guess the second half of that is any popular things you would have, like you would like to have in Dart. Are there like missing features in the language ecosystem from your exposure?
Um, I wouldn't say missing features. More, I think the kind of the package ecosystem on the server side of things isn't as great as say the npm ecosystem.
Yeah.
I think I would love a really good kind of HTTP routing type library for Dart server side. I think there was some good ones, and then some of them have now been deprecated and no longer maintained.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of one of the downsides is the server side package ecosystem isn't as great at the moment.
Yeah, and it comes with the I know in the early days of Swift too as well, because back in 2016, I think it's when Swift was launched. Um, that was one of the concerns is that at the moment, I think Cocoa Pods, which was heavily Objective C, needed to have some sort of something to come after that that was Swift friendly, which I don't even know. Like you're in the tooling space, so I'm gonna ask you to throw a bunch of questions on you. That feel free to
Okay.
like defer and be like, yeah, I don't know. But like no Carthage, which was like the Swift Cocoa Pods, I don't even think it's
Yeah.
still around anymore. I guess what's your do you have a take on the tooling space when it comes to native development versus using um, these sort of hybrid tools like Flutter?
I'd say the hybrid tools are kind of more designed for non-native developers. So they're a lot more friendlier and doing things a newer way versus I don't know like a C make file on native code or having a Gradle build set up on Android. It tends to be a lot cleaner and quicker and easier to get going versus native environments.
Yeah.
It's my findings anyway.
Okay, cool. And then you also mentioned before we even jumped on the stream that you don't actually use these tools yourself to build apps. So did you want to talk more about like the draw towards building tools versus building apps?
Yeah, I think the way I'm drawn to it is having an impact on other developers is what's kind of key to our um, company vision is just building tools and helping developers build better things with those tools. And from our perspective, that's kind of why we focus on the tooling. And it also tends to come with more challenges, I'd say, more problems to solve that haven't already been solved versus building an app, for example. And that's kind of why we focus in that area.
Yeah, that makes sense. Vortex is mentioning that building tools is humanitarian, and it's like so. I don't know if this is a good example, but everybody brings up the sort of pitchforks, not pitchforks, the pickaxes during the gold rush of building those so that way people can get gold faster. When it comes to things like Flutter, like it's like Dart's been around for a bit. Flutter's been around for less than a little bit, or less than a bit rather. And I think there's like a now developers now looking at it as like an option for them to build their mobile apps. So when it comes to approach it, like if I'm gonna approach doing Flutter and I can't even figure out how to get a build to run or how to get this compiled in Xcode, then I'm gonna move away from things like that. But when you have like one of the hardest problems I've actually had to solve, which is why I use Firebase, is managing data in iOS, which I always I forget because I don't never use it. But what's the data model in iOS Xcode?
It's just been a long time since I've done anything like that.
I think is it called Core Data? Maybe it's Core Data. Whatever it is, it was just like the go to place. So it's kind of like your Postgres, but in iOS. Um, this was at the time in 2016. This was awful to work with, which is why I personally think Firebase did so well with mobile
Yeah.
developers and attraction. And it's one thing that I've been really curious around when it comes to open source because if I go into like your project and I see 365 contributors, like there are a lot of folks that probably sit in this list are like, hey, I had a fix for this one thing,
Yeah.
but I imagine it's probably not the people in the top 10 here. It's probably like in the middle or lower. But Yeah, I'm curious of like what are some things that you do to, because like you have your team that it works in open source. So what are the things you do to engage contributions and keep people coming back?
Yeah. So from a Flutterfy perspective, it's kind of very early for us maintaining it, but I think I can speak from like a React Native side of things. Working on React Native Firebase, it was always just me and Elliot, for example, working on it for quite some time. And then eventually, it's kind of encouraging people to contribute and pointing them in the right direction, and always being positive on reviews and things like that have helped a lot. I think one of the main issues as well, sometimes some maintainers like myself, it's hard to let go of something.
Yeah.
It's your little fun project, your little baby, and then you don't want someone else to take over. But I think you need to also kind of let go and encourage other people to join in.
Yeah.
And I think from experience, that's kind of paid off on React Native Firebase. We've got some core contributors there now that aren't even part of the team. They just regularly contribute, and probably more than we do even. And that's kind of a good thing, really.
Yeah, how do you balance that value that you're providing to you? Do you like send them T-shirts, or do they get notifications or get invited to like weekly syncs or anything like that?
Yeah, so some of the things we do is kind of bring them in on internal conversations on, project direction, get them more involved with things there. Sometimes at meetups, yeah, we meet up with them, and then in some cases we offer to sponsor them for working on it.
Oh yeah, awesome. That's really cool too as well. Because I guess one thing we didn't even cover too as well is like what pays the bills for Invertis, like you keeping your staff like employed and getting them to still do open
Yeah.
source.
Yeah, so yeah, we're a self-funded company, and obviously some of it's our money, and some of it's comes from maintaining these other projects for other clients, and also kind of building internal tools as well. We tend to do that for some other clients as well. So there's some bits of work like that, but I think everything else we do is open source, and we try to kind of focus on clients that have issues in the open source space and work on their libraries, their projects, and kind of help keep them maintained and up to date. And that's kind of, I guess, where a bulk of our funding comes from.
Awesome. And then we kind of brushed over a bit, but you had mentioned around y'all are generating the SDK, or sorry, you're leveraging the existing SDKs. I don't know if you're able to point that out in the actual code and how that works. Um, so like, are you
Yeah, sure.
specifically hitting like a
Um,
URL?
yeah, so pick a platform, I guess, iOS, Android, or
Yeah, let's go with iOS.
okay, yeah, okay. Let's go. If so, you go into packages directory, and then I don't know, pick Cloud Firestore as an example,
Yeah.
and then there's Cloud Firestore again,
And I can see
and
the
then
the
yeah, you
learn
see there's an
inspirations.
yeah, lots of packages. And then yeah, Android direction. Oh, sorry, iOS. Sorry. And then yeah, you've got your standard pod spec there. If you look in there, you can see there's the iOS SDK being pulled in somewhere. Scroll down a bit.
Is it this
Um,
right here?
no, that's a Ruby script we use to make sure all the packages use the same version of the iOS SDK.
Okay.
I think yes, there it is where your mouse is, just above it. Dependency, Firebase, Firestore.
Okay.
Yeah, those are the official SDKs. And then, yeah, inside the classes folder, we have your Objective-C code that wraps that and provides a bridging API to Dart.
Okay, yeah, and then this is where my Objective C knowledge just kind of shuts down. It's been a while since I had to do .h and .m files,
.mess files, we call them.
mess files. Yeah, it's I mean the beauty of and it's funny because like what one thing I did like about Xcode and doing Objective C is that little of this code I had to actually type manually. A lot of it was sort of IntelliSensed for me. So I did enjoy that, and I like the fact that like VS Code does that pretty well. And I think I haven't used Dart and VS Code together, but I imagine with the types, it helps to they have types to be able to
Yeah,
sort of organize
a
it.
lot. Yeah, definitely helps. Yeah, there's an official extension for Dart and Flutter on VS Code.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, definitely helps a lot.
Cool. All right. Well, I think this conversation helped a lot too as well. I think I'm sufficiently educated around this. I think if I ended up building something from the Flutter Flow arena and like export that in the code, which I think that's the whole claim to fame that they have there, I'll be able to, um, yeah, I'll be able to leverage Flutterflyer in the future if I want to do something a little more advanced. So I'm looking forward to try that out. Any last words or advice you have for folks who are interested in open source and getting involved? Oh, I think you just muted.
Yep, standard catchphrase of 2021. Yeah, it's just basically just do it. It's a very cheesy line, but if you have a project that you're passionate about and you use it a lot and you want to give back, then have a look at their issues, have a look at things labeled good first issue, read their contributing guide, and just kind of reach out and contribute really.